All right, so let me guess. You see a lot of these programmers making the big bucks, and you wonder, hey, maybe I can do that too. Well, I've got some good news for you. Almost anybody can learn how to code. Now, that doesn't mean that everybody should code, but what it does mean is you don't have to be some kind of genius to make money from programming. And it's actually not that difficult to make a living from programming. So in this video, I'm going to take you guys through a step-by-step guide for how you can go from zero programming experience to making money from programming. And before we get started, I just want to say, if you enjoy this video, please feel free to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. All right, so I'm going to break this down into 5 major steps here, starting with step number 1, which is to just dive into the basics of programming. When it comes to learning anything, you should always focus on building a good foundation. So you're going to want to start with beginner level topics and advance your way through material until you get to those more advanced topics. This is something a lot of people don't understand about coding, and they try to jump into something a little bit too advanced at first. They get confused. They're like, oh, I guess I'm not smart enough to learn how to code. So you're going to have to start with some really beginner level things, build your foundation, and then work your way up from there. One of the first things people always stress about is, what coding language do I learn? But once you learn one and you get that foundation, picking up other ones is going to be a lot easier. I personally believe it's best to start with a programming language like Python or JavaScript. These coding languages are not very complicated. They're very English-like, so they're easy to pick up for beginners. They're both extremely popular with huge ecosystems. There's huge job markets for both of them. They're also both extremely easy to start building full stack projects with. So building projects in other programming languages might be more difficult to understand and get working. With these, easy peasy. If you really want to learn a different programming language than those, for whatever reason you have, go for it, but it's probably going to be a little bit more difficult. Once you decide on your starting point and what coding language that you want to learn, you have to find a good resource to learn from. This part's extremely important, and this is going to be make or break for whether or not you continue learning to code after you try it for the first time. If you're trying to learn and you're not comprehending what you're doing and it's making no sense, then of course you're going to quit and you're going to give up and you're going to be like, oh, I guess you have to be a genius to do this. I can't do it. But what you might not consider is it might just be a bad resource. There's tons of bad resources in programming, links that you could click, tutorials and guides and documentation and so much confusing stuff. I'm like, what is this? Who made this? I don't understand what they're saying. And sometimes it could be a reputable company or a reputable person, someone with 20 years of experience coding with all of these accolades and achievements in coding. And then they'll go on YouTube and try to explain it to you, and they'll make no sense because they're not a good teacher. What you need is a resource that works for you. Look on YouTube. Find some people that resonate with you, that teach you, and you can understand what they're saying. Look through different people. Look through different interactive tutorials. Check it out. See if the text makes sense. It's easy to read. It's easy to understand. It's easy to do. Find what's going to engage you and increase your comprehension and make it easy for you to learn and not be boring. I think that's going to be different for everybody. When I first started learning to code, I used Codecademy interactive tutorials, and then I also used the New Boston on YouTube channel with a tutorial for probably every programming language. There's probably a ton of better resources now and way more teachers out there, so I encourage you, look around, find something good. And then the last thing that's really important to keep in mind while you're learning the basics is you need to stay consistent. Super obvious saying, but practice makes perfect, right? 1 hour of coding every day of the week is going to be way better than 7 hours of coding one day each week. Learning to code requires consistency because there's too many details and so many different things you're going to be learning. So you need that stuff fresh in your mind. So I definitely recommend coding every day or every other day, because if you take too many gaps between your learning, you're going to forget a lot of the stuff that you've already learned. So that's pretty much it for step 1, dive into the basics. Pick a programming language, find a good resource to learn from, and then stay consistent while you learn it. All right, so now on to step 2. Once we have a good basic understanding of coding, I highly recommend for people to experiment with a bunch of different things. If you want to program for a living, then keep in mind that you're going to be spending hundreds and hundreds of hours programming. So I'd imagine that somebody wouldn't want to spend hundreds and hundreds of hours of their life doing something that's boring to them or that they don't like at all. Everybody will be interested in different things, but I implore you to try a bunch of different things to see what you like. Definitely try a little bit of the classic stuff, get into some web development, some app development, maybe a little bit of cybersecurity if you want to try that out. But then also look at some new trending fields like artificial intelligence or Web3 with like blockchain development. You know, the industry changes fast. A few years ago, ChatGPT didn't exist. Now ChatGPT is kind of shaking things up. There's a new job position now. It's called prompt engineer. And just a few years ago, everyone's just learning React.js, how to make some web apps, and then they get hired for that. But now with artificial intelligence, you're seeing some pretty powerful low-code or no-code platforms. For example, there's a new platform, Wix Studio, that just got released. And that's basically a no-code solution to web dev altogether. Like, you can add code and stuff, but the web builder is pretty insane. It uses AI for the responsiveness. It's got insane code-free animations, no code animations you could select from. They're really insane. And then enterprise infrastructure and like a bunch of other things. It's crazy. So while it's good to learn about established technologies, we got to keep an eye on trending technologies and keep our mind open and learn some of that stuff too. Either way, it's good to dabble a little bit in everything, not only to find what you're interested in, but also to understand the tech landscape. All right, now that you've dabbled in a little bit of everything and you found what you're interested in, it's time for step 3, which is to narrow your focus and choose a specific path. At a certain point in programming, you're going to want to focus in on getting really good at one specific thing, and that's eventually what you're going to be paid to do in programming. Since this is what you're going to be paid to do, this should be something that not only you're interested in, but that there is a job market for, or that you can make money doing. So you're going to have to do a little bit of research before you narrow down on anything, because sometimes your interests don't align with high income. You know, for example, if you want to focus strictly on game development, that's what you want to do for a living. Just know that there's going to be way more opportunities if you learned web development, for example, than game development. Now, I'm not saying game development's necessarily a bad thing to go into. I'm just saying understand the job market for the things that you're going to learn. When it comes to education, you should always think of return on investment. Now, speaking of education, if you're building software these days, you don't necessarily need a traditional education anymore. I don't really see any companies requiring a degree 100% these days. They're usually saying degree or equivalent work experience. And I'm also kind of seeing diminishing returns in college degrees right now. So my advice to people is don't really go into debt to learn how to code. I think it's kind of a bad idea. Boot camps could be all right, but my advice is, if you're determined, you should be able to self-teach yourself all of this stuff. I think the term self-taught programmer is kind of losing a little bit of value these days just because everything's online now. Everybody's working from home. Everybody's teaching online. Everybody has a social presence online. I really don't see that much of a difference between being in person in a lecture hall of a college and a professor's teaching me versus a video recording of the exact lecture hall. So I think there's enough good resources online right now to self-teach yourself to code and get a job. All right, so now for step 4. You've decided what you want to focus in on. Now it's time to code. And this is where the learning process becomes like a literal video game. Building usable software projects from scratch is going to teach you exactly what industry is like. Every programmer is going to tell you coding is the best way to learn coding. Coding is problem solving. So if you work on a variety of different projects, you'll face a variety of different problems. And with each project, you'll start to see reoccurring problems that you've already solved previously. And then you'll be able to solve them easier. And then you'll get better and better at coding. So really all you have to do is build, code. Start with small projects, work your way up, build more advanced things, and then not only will coding these projects give you the skill set you need to actually work and make money from coding, but it's also going to build up a nice little portfolio of projects for you to showcase to get hired and make money coding. And even go on GitHub and start contributing to other people's projects that are open source. There's companies with tons of open source projects. You can start contributing. You can get hired from that too. All right, so finally we've made it to step 5, the final step. And now all you need to do is network and market yourself to start making money. And this is probably the most important step for when it comes to making money coding. Have you ever heard the saying, it's who you know, not what you know? And obviously that's not 100% true, but somebody with a big network and knows a ton of successful people will be more likely to come across opportunities than somebody with a small network with unsuccessful people, right? It's just obvious. Just being likable is going to help you go a long way in almost every aspect of your life. I got my very first software engineering internship by sending this super heartfelt message about like, hey man, I really want you to make my dream come true. I want to intern here. And the guy gave me a chance. And since then, I've interviewed at hundreds of companies, and I've noticed that being likable and getting along with the people goes a long way in the interview process as well. Networking and marketing are super easy nowadays because of social media. If you really want to differentiate yourself from the competition and be marketable, you definitely should have social media. You should be growing those. You should be posting coding content. You should have a portfolio with all of your projects. you should be like a prime candidate, and that's how you're going to get job opportunities. If you're trying to network with people nowadays, I think you're more likely to be successful at building like real connections if you're coming at them from a like, I want to be your friend perspective, rather than a, hey, I want to learn, I'm trying to get into the business, I need your advice, all of this spammy kind of things. Because people are getting so many of those messages every day now that you should just be like, hey, what's up? And hope that someone wants to be friends with you. If you're putting an effort to learning to code, if you're improving your skills and you're documenting that stuff on social media, people are usually going to see that and they're going to be pretty supportive. The coding community is a very supportive one and they like to see people succeed. So just be humble, be genuine, be friendly, be likable, and that'll all go a long way. People will notice and people will support you. Now, as far as marketing goes, you're going to want a good resume template and you're going to want a good portfolio. Once you build some impressive projects related to the field you're trying to get into and you put them on a portfolio to showcase them, then once you apply to positions, or whether you're trying to freelance and you're just trying to pick up jobs on sites like Upwork or People Per Hour, this should be no problem because people will be able to go to your portfolio. They'll see the projects. They'll be like, oh, he's building things related to this. He's obviously qualified. And then they'll want to hire you. And then my final controversial take would be spam your resume. Whenever I apply to jobs, I spam it to hundreds of jobs, and it has never come back to haunt me. Nobody knows that I'm spamming it. It doesn't matter. So go ahead and spam your resume out, and your email will flood with responses. So that's pretty much it, guys. Those are all of the steps I'd recommend taking to go from zero to full-time programmer. I don't think it's that difficult. For some people, it could take years for them to start earning from coding, but for some people, it can be done in as short as a few months. So I hope this at least gives you insight into whether or not you want to try to learn to code, if this seems like too much, if this seems reasonable, and you're going to try it now because of this step-by-step process. Go for it. I'm excited for you. Please drop a comment below if you have anything to add to this video. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like. And if you found it interesting, subscribe, because there will be more content like this coming to the channel soon. Until next time, I'll see you guys later. Bye-bye.